Good afternoon, everybody. It's Steve and the BIA team here for this BIA AMR update and discussion. Thank you all for joining. I think we've got about, how many people, Danielle?
19.
19 of you on the line. So if it's okay, what I'll look to do is run through some slides to frame the debate. I am keen to make this as interactive as possible. Doing that on a webinar with 19 people may cause some noise difficulties, but we'll risk it and open up the lines at appropriate moments and seek comments as we go through. So I hope what we could get from today is very much from the proposed agenda that I shared with you in advance before this call. Are the push incentives working for the community? What's being developed globally as pull incentives, and when might these make a difference? And then I think some stuff from my perspective, which is really about how do we organise as a group, what can we do best, how can we maximise the exposure of us all as an AMR drug discovery and drug development community in the UK, working on a key global goal, set out the landscape as I see it in terms of the processes and groups that are working on this, and I think it's important that we understand where we as a BIA group fit in the jigsaw of other groups that are working on this. Then I've got some key dates that I'm working towards for 2018, and I'm keen to get your input on that, and then what we might do together. So thank you very much in the first instance for getting together, and I thought it might be useful for us to just share who I think we have got on the line together. So you can see, I hope, on the slide, and I'm hoping everybody is able to see the screen. You can see we have a good group here going around the virtual table, from those who've, like Pete, who've been involved in pushing this agenda with the groups, with the meeting earlier in the year. It's great also to have James Anderson at GSK, who's been a leading light in the AMR Alliance along, as well as some figures from across the smaller company perspectives, Destiny Pharma, Nova Biotics, Neem Biotech, who will summit, some of whom have been on this journey for many years, others of whom are newer players in this space. So I hope we're in a position to have a useful discussion. I'm going to suggest that we open up the line here now and see if there's anybody who wants to make initial opening comments. So,
where are you? Are you in London?
No. Hello? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We're in London, so we're on now.
Ah, cool.
So watch out. If
Is that you?
Just leave that one and go for the other ones. Okay. Colin, we have some problems with your line, but we're going to open up everybody else's line and see if there's anybody who's got comments at this stage. Colin, we're getting howl round from you, so I'm afraid.
You can hear us, hopefully. Nick, you still on?
Yes, I'm here.
Great.
Morning, everyone. Morning, Nick.
Okay, so I guess, Clive, would you like me to kick off, or do you want to?
No, you should lead it. You've been dealing with it.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks everyone for the time. We can try and make this as brief as you all need it, but it's to specifically give you an update on where we are with Avinity and Horizon, following Horizon losing their CEO, and then telling us that they didn't intend to put the second tranche of 2.8 million into Avinity. Okay. So the last time we all spoke, it was agreed that Avinity should make the first move, which we have since done. I think we to a board call and a board meeting last week. The first one, we sent the minutes out to both.
Right. Apologies. I wasn't sure that sounded like, to my extent, a discussion about AMR. So I've muted that discussion. Apologies. Is there anybody who's on the line who could type in to see if they can hear me? Please, if you've got questions, or you can type, James or Deborah or Hakeem, if there's anybody who can send me a question to say that they can hear me. I was made very nervous there by that discussion on the audio when we opened people up. Anybody? So thank you, Neil. You can hear me. Thank you. So that was. So I think I'm. Yeah, we're expecting an AMR discussion on this line. So I'm going to continue with the AMR discussion. We were hearing a very odd piece of audio around something else there. So I'll keep going with these slides. And if you've got points that you want to come in on, please do so on the questions for the next few minutes whilst we. And I'll come back to you as soon as you can. But that's who I think is joining us. That's who was signed up to join us, and heard some very odd things in that one. So apologies there. I'm interested in this group discovering what our experiences are of the push incentives around Carbex, Drive AB, working with BARDA in the States, and potentially others. And I'm not sure we can do this in an open format if the lines aren't working, but I think one of the things I'm keen to get is where have you guys with these things? Obviously, since we've been together in the BIA format for a while, we've not had a discussion around the table, and I know there's been differences of views as to how these work for people, whether people have found them useful. So I just thought it was useful to touch base on it. So I'll come back to this at the end. So I'm interested to find out how these things are working, and broadly, if they're not working, that would be useful for us to know. I've then put, how can we maximise the exposure of us as an AMR drug discovery and development community in the UK working towards a key global goal? I think there's two ways in which we may wish to do this. First of which I'm keen to talk to you all about today. The BIA is doing a number of spotlight on publications this year around areas of interest amongst certain groups of the BIA members. We may well do one on what's going on in cell and gene therapy, given the excitement around CAR T products launching. We're also thinking of doing one this year around BIA member engagement and involvement in the AMR agenda. It's something we're often asked about by the media, and we thought it would be good to be able to pull together a snapshot of the type of work that you're doing. We do have work that's happening in big companies, we have work that's happening in small companies, and we were hoping to pull that together into a publication. I think the time frame for that, and what I'm looking for by the end of this call, is whether that makes sense and an assent to do that. So this would be a sort of a glossy brochure explaining the types of companies that we've got in the UK working in this area, snapshots around the specific work that each company is doing, and we would get a professional writer to help us do the heavy carrying on this, but it would need the engagement and positive support of our member companies to spend some time speaking to the writer to help us put this together, and it'd be great if we could get a couple of pictures. But I've spoken to a couple of you on this. I think it's a good idea. We'd be happy to do it, and that's one of the things that we'd be keen to do off the back of this. The second is, and Pete and Jeff have obviously worked very hard on the BioInfect conference over a number of years in Audley Park in the autumn. Perhaps there's some experience here that could help lean in towards the program build for that conference, which I think has done very well, and perhaps we can also use that as a peg in the year to show what the UK community is doing on AMR, particularly with a small company focus. On the pull incentives, I think that I see sort of visibility on three things that I think is happening in 2018, and James Anderson may be able to comment on these particularly, or I don't know if we have a colleague from the ABPI on the line, don't we? Whose name escapes me. Apologies, I haven't got it in front of me. But perhaps James or the ABPI can comment on the first one on this, and we're going to open you up in a second and try and get you to speak again if we're not going to get bleed across. But so I think that there's some work in the UK going on about how health technology assessment might focus or think about AMR, which is expected in Q2. And we know that there's some work going on with the government on value, which may have an impact in the summer. James, and we're going to try and open you up, and I'm wondering if you can give us a comment as to where that's got to. Don't see him on the line, and colleague from the ABPI is Andrew.
I don't think he's on the line.
Andrew.
Hello?
Yeah, hi Steve.
Do you
want me to Do you want me to be able to go through the? Let me briefly summarize.
Yeah.
So where we are is we broke down the AMR structured into two subgroups. One is the reimbursement and evaluation subgroup, and the second is the appropriate use and stewardship subgroup. And James has been the overall lead for both, and specific also subgroup lead for reimbursement and evaluation. And what we did is we broke that down into two further components, one part associated with the valuation of an AMR asset, and the second is a reimbursement framework that would be used by DH and Treasury and others to fund the commercialization of new antimicrobials. And in terms of timings, what we did is a reimbursement model was submitted to the Department of Health at the beginning of March, and it represented consensus view from 5 or 6 of the large pharmaceutical companies who were on the subgroup. And that's currently undergoing review within Department of Health and Social Care, and it's being with oversight from Emma Reed, who was recently appointed to the function. The second bullet point that you have up there is on the valuation of assets. What was interesting there was the Department of Health commissioned research from their Economic Policy Research Unit, otherwise known as EPRU, which is a hybrid or collaboration between Sheffield and York universities. And they've been looking at different ways in which the HTA platform or foundation could be enhanced or developed further to really kind of assess these assets that don't really neatly fit into an HTA framework. They're due to report back at the end of April. And interestingly, though, one of our another company had been developing their own independent product-specific models, which ended up being quite similar in terms of direction of travel. And EPRU's feedback was this was actually really quite a good independent effort and consistent with EPRU's line of travel. And once the company has done its own individual assessment, I think during the second half of 2018, we'll take a look at the valuation model and see if we can open that up a bit and make it something that might resonate with other companies as well.
Andrew, thank you. That's really clear and really helpful. So I think one of my core aims from this group is to make sure that people have a good understanding of the work that's going on in other places so that we don't reinvent the wheel, that we can focus from a BIA perspective really on the innovation that's coming from small companies and making sure that they are aware of activity that's going on with other groups. So I think that that's very helpful. I'm seeing if there's any questions from anybody on the points that Andrew has made, but I think that gives us good clarity. And Andrew, I'm going to suggest that we mute you again, and I'm going to just run through the other pieces on the global incentives, because obviously I'm conscious that that companies from the UK are developing these for a global market. And I have the fortune of sitting on the Europa Bio board, and therefore we follow the AMR discussion at a European Union level. And I think that there is continued discussion in the European Commission about, and particularly in the European Parliament, ENVI, which is a committee in the European Parliament around this, which may lead to some more plans popping out of the European Union. Obviously, there's a new commission that starts to take effect in a year or so's time. They'll have got Brexit out of the way by then, but that may lead to further practical plans to give reality to the political aspiration to tackle the AMR challenge. So I think it's one to watch, and we as a BIA need to be linked into and engaged with that through the process of Brexit. I don't think there's anything immediate happening there, but it's one that we're watching. And then I'm obviously aware through colleagues at BIO and discussions I've had at BIO Europe that there are moves afoot within the USA, the world's primary market for medicines, to on the AMR agenda. And it seems that the runner or rider for 2018-2019 on Capitol Hill is whether a transfer of exclusivity voucher can be attached to AMR assets, which will go in alongside some other technical bills that work on how the US healthcare system updates, BARDA, and the next round of things. I'm not close to this, but the reason I put it on the agenda is I think it matters for the valuations of AMR companies globally if there are assets in this space, a little bit like the transfer of exclusivity vouchers have had an impact on assets that are able to attract those in pediatrics and other indications in the US. So I think as a UK group, we need to be cognizant of this, where it's got to. We can gain access and influence to, well, certainly access to the discussion and be able to put a halfpennyworth into those discussions through bio and global groups. But I think it's one that we should have on our radar. And I'm also conscious that China, and we're lucky to be joined by colleagues from Destiny today, who already have a link up in China. China are also appraised at a political level of the importance of this imperative. I don't have great insight into what that means in terms of how do they turn political imperative into practical implications that can make a difference for our members, but it's one that I keep on the list as this. So I'm checking in on the questions boxes in case people are typing. Jeff, I will answer your question in a second because I'm going to come to that in a bit. And Joe, it's good that we can hear you. So we'll try and open ourselves up again in a minute, but I thought it was useful if I can to make some progress through these. So just the lie of the land in terms of groups that I'm aware of that are working in this space in 2018. Jeff, John, Pete, I know that you had a successful meeting earlier in the year where you looked at the pipeline in the UK, what was going on, and had some initial discussions. I'm very sorry I wasn't able to make it, but I hope that this chimes in with some of the thinking and work that you were doing there, and I've certainly been kept appraised of it. This group, which we've got together for the first time this year, Andrew's given us a good sense of the work that's going on in the ABPI, both in terms of the reimbursement group and the stewardship work. I think from our perspective, because most of our companies are at the discovery and development phase, there's less of a challenge around stewardship, and I don't look for that to be something that we do much work on, other than continue to support it in general. It's not a piece that I think we have great expertise for or great ability to influence from this work, but I think we were keen to engage. We're keen to keep an understanding that is being worked on in other areas. The UK government high-level AMR group, I'm told, is likely to reform in 2018, having been in abeyance. People moves and various things meant it didn't meet in 2017. But I think there's some substantive work that's likely to appear. Some of that which Andrew talked to, but also I think that there's a push to have another meeting of this group this year, which is a key way in which the AMR agenda across the piece, not simply the discovery and development end of it, but across the piece can be developed. The Beam Alliance is continuing to forge ahead at a European level. The alliance of smaller companies working in antimicrobial resistance been around, formally came together last year, and I know I think Deborah, you're active in it, and others are active in it. I'm obviously know Florence and the gang there, so I think they're continuing to work at a European level, and I think we've got good connectivity with Beam, but we should be aware of them. And then, of course, the Global AMR Alliance came together after the Davos Declaration to ensure that both industry will continue to deliver on its commitments, and that's formalised somewhat in the last year. Held its first report at the time of this year's Davos, and runs effectively now under IFPMA organisation through the guys at Geneva, and I have the benefit of being the biotech rep on that group to make sure that there is a biotech input into it. So I just thought it was useful for you to see that there's stuff working globally, stuff working at European level, stuff working at UK level, and then ourselves to give us a coordination. So I think my point to here is I think we should be specific about what we do in this group, not try and boil the ocean and do everything, but have a small piece of the jigsaw and bring something meaningful that can add value along the lines that I've suggested. So I hope that's useful. So I'm thinking we will sit in the policy space and look at this from the perspective of small companies, because that's what the BIA is primarily made of. I think the thing that we look at is there's been lots of policy work on this over the last few years, but is that translating into action that's translating into the development of companies, and companies that are developing in this space, are they able to access and use the policy initiatives that are in place? So I think we should be practical and focused in that space, but I'm also open to suggestion at this stage if you think we're doing the wrong thing and you want us to move in another direction. I think we should also be collaborative and work with everybody else and not look to replicate anything that anybody else is doing, and that's why the idea is to do this sort of publication showing the vibrancy of the UK landscape and what's going on. Some dates that I've got in my diary for this year, and others may have others that I'm unaware of. Next month, the AMR Industry Alliance will get together in Geneva at the IFPMA offices for a whole day meeting. I'm invited to that. Greg, who works at BIA, goes to that meeting. James goes to that meeting for GSK. In May, Andrew, you gave us the update. I just put a marker in for, is there some publication or some activity coming out from the work that's been commissioned and working? I don't know if that date's correct, but I'm thinking maybe first half of the year. King's College have got a commemoration oration where Sally Davis is making the continued high-level case around AMR on the 9th of May. It's an evening event, but knowing Sally, when she gives a keynote speech, often that's a point at which AMR gets into the headlines. So it might be a point at which we could either attend and show what companies are doing, or should be aware in case she has a new direction in which she wants to take it on. At the Bio Conference this year, there is going to be a panel on AMR, probably on Monday afternoon. You can see the title of it here, What's Roles of Venture Capitalists, Biotechs and R&D Manufacturers. Thomas Groney of IFPMA and myself are booked on to speak on that. So that will be another opportunity for global level discussion. BioInfect at Audley Park. Jeff, apologies if I've missed the date. I'm not sure we've got a date fixed yet, but if we have, that's one that we should talk about. And then we have our Bioscience Forum conference on the 18th of October, which may also be an opportunity for engagement. So this is how do we, if our role is, and you can see where I'm going here, if our role is to highlight and champion the role of the company bases in the UK who are working on discovery and development in this space, and holding to account those policymakers who've made commitments in this space, either to work on those policies in detail or to give a practical feedback as to whether they're working or not, or whether the absence of them is causing difficulty, then I think we should coalesce around certain high points in the year and provide a communication platform. And that's why I've put these down. There may well be others that are sensible. Where I was hoping us to get to is, do we think doing a BIA spotlight on AMR publication might be a good thing to do this year? I hope we can get consensus for that from this meeting. Can James represent this group at the AMR Alliance in April? Who can go to the Sally Davis speech at King's? Maybe some people already are. Jeff, is there anything Pete, we can do to help with for BioInfect? And then I'll come to your question in a sec. Do we need to meet again in this format? And if so, when and how? Perhaps May, perhaps by WebEx. And if there's some other meetings that go on with government or the ABPI are putting stuff out, we'll look to inform this group with Andrew's help by email if things happen in between. So that was really where I'd got to. I'm going to go to the questions that I've got, and then I'm going to try and open up again. So Jeff, you were asking on the potential timelines, and could the AMR report be launched at BioInfect on the 8th of November? There's a date, so you've shared with me the date, 8th of November. I think November's possible. I'm looking at Pamela here. Pamela, do you want to?
Yeah, I think this is something, as Steve said, we're looking to do. So I think certainly the view would be ready ahead of November, so that is certainly an opportunity which could be used. Cool. So the answer's probably, if we agree in principle, then we should be able to get it done by then. And Joe Pisani, I know you're on the line. You've done some PwC analysis of this internally. I don't know if you've got
thoughts or experience from this that you want to share with us. Your stuff has always been very helpful in the past. And then Colin, I'm going to try and come to you as well to talk about why AMR can't be treated as an orphan disease, and can we use the legislation which is already in place. I think that there's a technical challenge with using orphan disease legislation, which is in a sense solving market failure to drive towards something which is of use by the market failure is because it's not used by many people because the market potential is very small. I think with antibiotics, in some senses, the challenge is not that the market potential is small. The challenge is that the market value is both created and small, which is a slightly different policy challenge in terms of how you get to it. I get the thinking, but I don't think you could use orphan legislation as it is presently enacted to do it. I think that some of the thinking that was behind orphan legislation is the right way of thinking it. Paul, that's a good one. So Joe has mentioned, are we connecting with the Science Museum and the Superbugs exhibition? No, is the simple answer to that. And they want to take it on tour. Well, I suppose they've taken their dinosaur on tour, but that's the Natural History Museum. But no, I mean, we've not tried to engage. As you know, the AMR spectrum in terms of the policy push is very broad. I've not endeavoured to sort of make us a front and centre engaged organisation on public engagement on this, or sort of the stewardship regime on this. We try and do the specific, we're trying to keep it on the specifics of push and pull incentives that make a difference to companies forming and continuing to do work in this area, and then I think showcasing that contribution to the desired global effort. So I'm trying to keep us niche because I think that's what we bring expertise in and are able to contribute on. We are obviously supportive of the big stuff, and I've now got a great idea of what I can do next time I take the kids to South Kensington. But that's a good thought, and maybe we can link up that. We can use some of our global connections to link up the Science Museum stuff with European and global incentives to know that they can do it. So let's try and open this up again, and we're going to try and see if we can have a discussion without it becoming something very unusual to us. Jeff, maybe you can hear us and try talking to me.
I can hear you, Steve. Yeah, and I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. That's great success. So we're broadly opening up the discussion here. We're trying to get everybody in where we can. Some of you have self-muted, so to get you to join. But Jeff, why don't I ask you to some thoughts and your perspective? Then I'm going to come to James and Deborah.
Yeah, so I mentioned, so BioInfact, I think my question around my question around the dates were whether we could sort of launch a report if that goes ahead, and
Final comments, anything else?
Just some of the key aspects of that report in the agenda for BioInfact. So we'd be keen to do that. Joe did that for us from PwC on a previous BioInfact development report, and it went down really well. So I guess it's an opportunity that I'm talking about, and we'd like to sort of consider that.
Sure.
Yes.
Thank you.
Jeff, sorry, I need to drop off now, but we'd be very happy to refresh that report again, Jeff, if you need us for the November conference.
Okay, great. Thanks, Joe.
Okay.
Thanks, Joe. Deborah, have you got a perspective on Novobiotics? I know you've been working this for a while. Have you got thoughts as to whether a spotlight's a good idea, or whether we've got the key dates right and other things? We can't hear you. I'm sorry, but that may be because technical reason. Try now. No, computers have defeated us there. Colin, you've made a couple of points. Let's try and bring you in. I fear you may be self-muted, but do unmute if you want to join the discussion. Bill, are you trying to come in?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, right. So a few things I just wanted to mention. Obviously, Joe, as at PwC, has had a long-standing interest in the AMR space. I spoke recently with someone from the Economist Intelligence Unit who are also interested in AMR, and they're producing a report. I don't know if you're aware of that. They're looking at AMR from a global perspective. And the other thing I just wanted to say is, obviously, as a charity, Anti-Project Research UK, we're keen to work with pharma and biotech to try and increase the profile of AMR, and obviously try and see drugs being developed for patients. We have been working with politicians to try and get this highlighted, and my local MP, Kevin Hollinrake, has been quite active in the House. He tells me that the York report, which was mentioned, the York-Sheffield report, should be available in, I think, around about April time. And I think, Steve, you mentioned the BIA, ABPI reports as well. I think the government's sort of waiting for those reports before they decide what to do going forward.
Thanks, Colin. I know your continued commitment to this space, and it's great to see the charity going from strength to strength. I think it's a testament to your hard work to see it moving at a Westminster level. I hope that you can see that this sort of related agenda with regards to sort of company development is useful, and what we're trying to make sure is that some of those commitments that came up in the O'Neill review and other plans are working on the ground for companies. I think it's important to reflect the relationship between charities and companies in this space, and I'd look to do that as part of our report as well. But in the same way, I'm keen to make sure that you've got your perspective on this, and that the charity has, is a clearly identified thing. Industry is a clearly identified thing, and we can work together where it's appropriate. Probably the vagaries of profit-based incentives for small companies are probably more us than you, I would think.
Yeah, that's correct. Just one other thing to mention, you talked about collaboration, and I believe collaboration is best undertaken by all the stakeholders in this space. So pharma, biotech is obviously one, government is another, patients and the patient voice, that's not well represented at the moment, and our charity is trying to do something about that. Unless you get patients writing to their MPs saying that their antibiotics aren't working, then I think politicians tend not to take much notice. So I just wanted to flag that.
Thank you. Yeah, no, good point. James, I'm going to try and bring you in. Maybe you've got a perspective. I think you've muted yourself, so you may need to unmute yourself if you want to contribute anything here. Apologies, we're hearing some noise. I'll try and get rid of that for you. Okay. I'm wondering if there's anybody else who's got anything to contribute. Either type into the questions panel, or speak if you want to speak.
Steve, it's Jeff Davison here again. Can you hear me? Yeah,
I can.
Okay, great. I was just wondering if anyone from the AMR centre's online, because if we're talking about sort of data and report writing and stuff, I know Pete Jackson's doing quite a lot of work around trying to map the sort of UK pipeline in AMR research, and has gathered quite a lot of data, some of it from the sort of public sources, Innovate UK and various other sources. So I'm just, I wanted to flag it to the group, and also sort of potentially to be included in any sort of information gathering type exercises.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. And I think Pete, I hope you think you're on the line. Do contribute.
Yeah, we were just muted earlier, just so we didn't contribute to the background noise. Steve, thanks for pulling this together. I think this is really important to get your support on the policy agenda and to make sure this is all linked into other initiatives that are going on. Earlier in the year, with Jeff's help and with help from LifeArc, we pulled an industry group together, and we've been following up with that offline directly with the companies. What we were hoping to try and do is to get contributions from all of the industrial players in UK, mainly biotechs. Our immediate focus is on therapeutics developers. We do want to do something on diagnostics, but I think that's a bigger challenge with not as much data available as there was on the therapeutic side. But we felt it was important to move ahead with what we have now, and then do maybe something a second attempt on what's happening in diagnostics. So we had we've got 20 odd biotechs that we've been engaging with, and actually, as of the end of last week, I've just come up with a first draft based on the research that's been done so far. So what we've done in that is to look at what the UK has received as a share, what the companies have received as a share of the international push funding. Should also say we felt we should concentrate on what's happening on the push side of the agenda, because that's more appropriate right now for the smaller companies. And also, we're aware of these other initiatives going on that we don't want to cut across, but we would very much like to support the conclusions that come out from all of those. So on the push funding, we've looked at what UK organisations have received from EU, the IMI, various initiatives, Enable, Compact, and so on. I had a conversation in Berlin a couple of weeks ago with some of the folk from those organisations, and effectively I was told that the EU funding streams are now closed down to UK SMEs. There are still things in the pipeline, but the executives from those organisations saw it very, very difficult to be able to progress any UK applications given the uncertainties around Brexit. So that's a significant issue. We've looked at what's been received by UK companies from Carbex, and to date only around 4% of the Carbex grants that have been announced that have gone to UK organisations. And then there's GuardP as well, and that's only early days, but there have been no awards for UK. We've also done some research with help from LifeArc, getting information from Innovate UK, and certainly opposite the WHO critical priorities, biomedical catalyst so far has, over the past 6 years, has put 8 million into 5 different companies, and that's spread over 6 years. So given the amount of funding that's required, that's an extremely small amount. And the UK GAMRIF fund's currently got a 10 million UK China initiative, which includes therapeutics to be co-developed as initiatives with Chinese organisations. But we also understand from the administration around GAMRIF that future projects there won't focus on therapeutics. I think the primary money there is coming in from DFID, so the focus there will be to establish capacity and surveillance and such like in international markets. So as well as doing that research, we've also done research on what's the current UK pipeline. We believe from public domain and responses from the people we've been in contact, there are 40 odd projects from discovery through into the clinic within different organisations, and an initial analysis of that shows that just to take the current pipeline on to each of the next stages of development would require about a £200 million investment, whereas again public domain analysis of the funding position for these companies suggests that there's less than 50 million on the balance sheets of all of those companies. So there is a big funding gap. UK companies don't appear to have been able to access the push funding to the level that we should be. And then the final piece in the jigsaw is that AMR companies are finding it incredibly difficult to attract investment. And I think all the companies at the workshop in January reported that either now or in the past, programs have been put on hold or substantially delayed by their inability to raise capital, and actually to raise capital to be able to provide the matched element of international grants as well. So there are some great projects out there, but I think the overall conclusion is that we have a great opportunity, but we don't have the capacity in translating some of these things out from universities into SMEs and into the clinic. And there is substantial underinvestment, and the UK is not getting its share of the push incentives that are out there. I'm more than happy to share the draft for comments around. We're thinking that this is probably a paper that we'd like to get out in Q2 before the summer. But we'll take advice on how best to get maximum impact from this call. We are asking for not necessarily new money from government, but some of the existing mechanisms to be ring-fenced and allocated to the fight against AMR, because at the moment the UK's policy and diplomatic leadership doesn't appear to be translating through into funding and action on the ground.
Pete, thank you very much for that. Really, really useful. And thank you for the willingness to share the draft. I mean, I'm happy to review, and I'm sure others will be keen to see if we can facilitate that round, and happy to work with you on helping you get the impact for that in Q2. You can see there's a few key dates there that might make sense to put it around, and I think, as you say, that analysis is really useful. I think that's why I focused less on the push incentives and more on the pull incentives, if you like, because, as you say, I think you've got an analysis of the push incentives. There are some, and they are either working or not. I think the real challenge is that for venture money to come in alongside, they need to be able to see that there's a value inflection point at the other end, and that's why we need pull to work to get this chain to work all the way along. And that's where it feels to me the gap is in terms of the policy environment. It's easy for governments to announce, yeah, we'll have a fund which will distribute some money on science projects. It's harder to get a market ecosystem working in this space, and that's what I'm trying to make the piece that we can bring some experience to. So thank you.
Steve, just I had one other question on the back of what you just said about the poll side. I did a bit of work with the Beam Alliance, and I've been bending the ear through Carbex by some of the BARDA colleagues. It's incredibly important for the SME community that big farmers around, in order to be able to acquire or help co-develop some of these assets when they get through to the clinic. And one of the things I've been keen on pushing, and I know Beam Alliance have picked this up as well, and that is that there's some sort of pre-qualification for pull incentives, such that some of that value can be ascribed to assets that are earlier in clinical development, and that it's not just something that is magically awarded as when a product gets to the end of it. So I don't know. I've not seen what's going to be going in as part of the submissions to UK, but I'd be very disappointed if there wasn't something in there that gave a nod to the importance of the SME community and came up with some mechanisms for them to be able to share in this value.
Absolutely, and I suppose the question is: do you look at these as a mechanism to drive opportunities for investment in SMEs, or do you see them as actual drawdown ability cashes? Because if you basically make it so that it makes it more attractive for venture caps and others to come in, then the value that the SME gets is there is a vibrant community of private capital that is available to invest in this space. So I think we need to, continue to need to be creative, and what's clear is that the different markets are going to look at pull incentives in different ways that are similar to their own markets and what works for their markets. And I think we need to be cognizant that those may look different and be able to play in that global space wherever we are in the development cycle. Deborah, I'm going to try one more time to try and get you in, because you're making some very interesting points here around EIB and EIF. You're engaged with the EIB Infectious Diseases Finance Facility, and you think it's still there. Deborah, you got a perspective on that?
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, hooray! Yeah, so thanks to James, actually, for flagging that these guys even existed. So a very specific part of the European Investment Bank. So connected with them late last year and thought that, just being a UK-based company would be a roadblock in the first instance. Turns out that it wasn't. And the only reason we can't submit an application now is just because their 2018 pipeline is full. But what they're saying, and even through a kind of Brexit transition period, is it is still open. And I think they're very cognizant of the proportion of AMR work across Europe that's actually being done in the UK. So I'd still encourage folks to engage with them for now. As they say, they don't know what the future is going to look like beyond the Brexit transition, but if any UK companies have qualifying projects, I'd definitely go for it. So thanks to James for the intro to those guys. And then I don't know if anyone's aware of this, but absolutely sort of in the VC space, the fact that Novaseeds popped up last month announcing this call that I believe opens next month with the repair fund, so specifically for transformational technology in the AMR space, really. So just very interesting that a VC has now kind of stepped in here. And back to Steve's point on, these guys need an exit and to make money. This is, I believe, for fairly early stage programs, trying to get things through late stage preclinical and into the clinic in some cases. So it's not, very advanced projects. So I think something that would fit a lot of the projects that UK SMEs actually have in this area. So yeah, just a couple of things I wanted to raise for everyone.
Thank you, Deborah. Really helpful. And I've got to say, I hadn't followed the detail of the EIB one. And I think the other thing from my perspective is if suddenly, because of Brexit, it starts to be cut off, we could then go to the UK government and say, British Business Bank, you need to make sure that you're providing opportunities that, you know, have hitherto been presented at a European level.
Yes.
So
hi, this is Pete again. I had a specific conversation 2 weeks ago with the guy that runs the InnovFin AMR instrument, and well, yeah, they have a full pipeline for this year and are going to be processing applications that are already in it. I specifically asked him whether whether they were accepting applications for UK. And of course, he didn't say no, they weren't. But what he did say was that he felt it would be extremely difficult for them to make any commitments to UK companies until all the fallout from Brexit is clear. So, yeah, I would encourage people to still go and talk to them, but I'm just reporting back what was actually said from the person that's dealing with all the applications.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. James, I wonder if you've got a perspective we've not heard from you. I'm hoping we may be able to hear from you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good, very good. Well, thanks. So a good call, a good discussion. Great to hear, Deborah, that's potentially making progress. I would say, I mean, as Andrew said at the beginning, really, what we all would like to see are antibiotics valued better, because that enables all the other pieces of the funding chain to come together, whatever source that's coming from, really. So the work that we've touched on with universities of Sheffield and York is probably, from my perspective at least, is probably the sort of the best academic approach that's been tried anywhere in the world. There was an advisory group meeting last week where it's clear that this is a super hard thing to do, and it may be that a pure modelling approach, which is, as everyone knows, is what the UK tends to try and do, simply may not work, because you can't model well enough or confidently enough how resistance trends are going to play out over time, particularly over the life cycle sort of period of 10 years or so. That being said, I do think this is the most sort of rigorous approach that's been tried anywhere, and so I see that as a good thing. It's a continued commitment from the UK. This work was funded jointly by the Department of Health and NICE together. So for me, it's not necessarily a delivery of exactly what we want, but it is a continued signal of the commitment that we have here, and the sort of the flexible approaches that people are trying to solve this one. And for sure, other countries are continue to look at what we do here in the UK. So if we can get something to work here, I think there's a good chance that other countries will be sort of nudged to try it out as well. So I think all that to say, I absolutely agree with basically what everyone has said. And we aren't there yet. The timings became a little bit clearer. There will be a draft produced by the end of April from these universities. That will be consulted, but they weren't clear exactly what the consultation process would be, or by who, and whether there was a sort of a private phase followed by a public phase, or how it would play out. So I think we need to just watch this space, but I'll make sure to feed into this group as soon as that is as clarified by the DH and NICE. Is there anything else that Steve or others would want me to comment on?
No, James, I think that's really useful. Have you got any sense of where you think the AMR Industry Alliance is going this year? Obviously, it sort of moves Davos to Davos in its sort of sort of its focus. Is there anything you think that we should be cognizant of for the 2018 agenda of that group? Obviously, you know, did the report this year, is looking to do something for the next year, largely large pharma influenced. But anything from that group that you think we should be cognizant of?
No, that's right. Really, the two main objectives for the board meeting in April are, first of all, to review sort of membership and how that works, and the goal is to be as inclusive as possible, and yet at the same time you don't want companies signing up to this thing who then don't play the game at all. So there's a tricky balance to strike there, so we need to work through that. And secondly, it's absolutely about looking forwards 2 years to say, okay, so we published this report this year, what do we want to be talking about in 2 years' time? And I would say, you know, the goal, which has, as we've said, stems through from the Davos Declaration, really is driven by public health needs rather than R&D needs as a priority. So what does that mean? Well, it means looking after the antibiotics that are already on the market through stewardship and surveillance and education. It means making sure that they're manufactured well in a way that doesn't cause pollution and contribute to development of resistance, and make sure that people around the world can access the antibiotics they need, you know, including in lower countries, as well as the R&D element. But I just want to sort of put it into the context of the public health goals being really the front and center of the Alliance work. So although the R&D element is very important, and that is absolutely where biotechs and other researchers you know, should seek to be involved, the context is clear that it's a public health agenda, and R&D is kind of one part out of four, really. So I know that's, you know, that is what it is. I think the balance then is how to be clear about what the biotech community would want to see in the R&D section going forwards in a resource efficient way. And Steve, we've discussed, you know, I am happy to help kind of play that role if that would be helpful.
Thank you, and James, I think your linkage between that world and this world is the key thing here. I mean, I think you and I sort of end up doing a bit of that both, and I think we're able to contribute to that. So thank you, and I think you're right. I think we'll see the report next year, which will be, you know, stewardship, surveillance. We've got good manufacturing practices. We're not filling rivers with the stuff that enable fish to gain antibiotic resistance. That type of stuff will be the focus, and we can make sure that we're aware that we're keeping going on the R&D agenda, but it's not likely to be the focus of it for next year. I'm going to endeavour to bring us to a close by the top of the hour, because it's always difficult to do a WebEx for more than an hour. I'm taking by acclamation and consensus on the thing that people are quite happy for us to work towards a spotlight on for the second half of the year. And that's what I think will be the main BIA focus. So we will come and ask you for stuff on that going forwards. I think I've certainly got a clearer picture of some of the other elements that are hoving towards us very fast. Thank you for the updates on from Andrew and James on the work that's being done with the universities and the government and NICE around about value for AMR products. Pete, it sounds like you've got an exciting document pretty much ready to go, and if we can help you boil that in the bag, bring it to fruition, put it in the microwave and make it go ping, then happy to do that in Q2. Perhaps there are a couple of points on the agenda in terms of the dates for Q2 that would make sense, and perhaps seeing how that goes, there might be some elements of your work that we could recycle into the spotlight on as material that would add as well. So that would be helpful from my perspective. I think we can see that there's the need to continue to work with the European guys. And Deborah, I look to your relationship with Beam as well. I mean, obviously I know Florence, I haven't bumped into her for a bit. Pete, you're obviously engaged in Berlin as well. If there's anything that we should do through the prism of Brexit, and I think, you know, there is a meta-narrative around Brexit, which is the benefits of continued close cooperation, and there may be some specifics here around the benefits of continued close cooperation in AMR, or the practical challenges of those falling apart in the next year, which we could we could hone in on either Pete at your event, James through the AMR Alliance, me at BIO, or at other points in the year. So that feels like it's worth it. I think the other thing that we could continue to do is, I think, just sharing this information in a practical and joined up fashion is useful, and I hope others see the value of that. So perhaps continuing to meet in this format a few times a year makes sense, just because it helps us to come together effectively and share dates. So I think I will suggest that we look to do this again in maybe, dependent, Pete, a bit on when you're doing your report or how that's going to come out, sometime in May. Feels about right, because that will give us a lead to BIO. We'll have know what's gone on at the Industry Alliance. So maybe we look to do another one of these in May. And thank you for letting us share the materials on background in advance. I think also just that network of sharing what's going on is useful, and I think we'll have had some things moved by May that enable us to update. So I hope that gives us sort of a sense as to where we go next. I think we'll organise ourselves at the BIA and write a write-up of this and an action note, which we'll distribute to this community. We'll look for your engagement on Spotlight, on the Spotlight publication, and send you some dates for future meeting in this format and seek any feedback. Unless there's anything else, I'm going to suggest we close now. Thank you for your time, your support, and look forward to working with you on this important agenda. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now.